Now you're very welcome back. So TJ Quinn, senior writer with ESPN, joins us live on the line. TJ, evening. You can hear us okay there?
Hear you fine.
Great to have you with us. Damar Hamlin, 24 years of age, a safety for the Buffalo Bills, drafted 2 years ago. He went into cardiac arrest on Monday Night Football against the Cincinnati Bengals. He is recovering in hospital in Cincinnati, where he remains in critical condition. I think most people have seen photos or perhaps the incident at this stage, but you might just describe what happened. Damar Hamlin, at 24 years of age, made a tackle and seemed to stand up initially and be okay, and then it became very apparent something was wrong.
Well, that's exactly what it was. It looked fairly routine as you were watching it. Receiver made a catch, turned forward, they made contact. There was nothing remarkable about it, especially when Hamlin popped back up. But that sight of him collapsing, I mean, it was anybody who has covered this issue or spent much time looking into issues involving sudden cardiac arrest on the field, immediately it evoked images of other athletes who've been through that.
So he made the tackle and then fell back on the turf, and akin to Christian Eriksen, a soccer player who endured cardiac arrest at the European Football Championships in the summer of 21. The players, were in shock, obviously. They seemed to form a circle around the administration of CPR.
They did. I mean, it's a violent sport. I mean, the collisions TV can't possibly do justice to the amount of force that happens when two NFL players slam into each other. And if you've ever stood on the sideline of an NFL game, you'd never look at it the same way. So they are used to that. But the idea of seeing somebody that helpless, it's different than any other injury. And you could tell by their reaction right away, this was not something they had seen before. How
long was CPR administered for?
Well, the report we saw that it was 9 minutes. But the question that I had, and really because of the experts I've spoken to, is when was an AED used? When did they, try to defibrillate him? Because a shock to the heart is, in some cases, more important than the compressions that come with CPR. And we know that an AED was administered at one point, but we really don't know much about what went on during those 9 minutes.
Okay, so 9 minutes. I mentioned he's in hospital in Cincinnati. I saw a friend of his speaking to ESPN, and the word was that the doctors had seen what they wanted to see in that initial 24 hours in terms of his recovery. Is he likely to make a full recovery to the extent, whatever, about playing again, but that he'll be able to hopefully leave hospital soon and get on with things, or where is he?
It's very hard to say. I mean, yeah, what you're referring to is he's essentially a marketing agent, very close to Damar Hamlin and to the family. We have gotten very little information, medical information about what's going on. I mean, they said early on that his vital signs were stable. Well, that doesn't mean much. I mean, if he was without oxygen, if his brain and his organs were without oxygen for more than 5 minutes, there is a significant, overwhelming chance of brain damage, of permanent damage to the brain and other organs. The cardiologists I've spoken to said that's what they're most concerned with, and what they've heard about in terms of how he's being treated. They say that that's all consistent with somebody who had significant loss of oxygen to the brain. So it could be that, when they say his vitals are moving in the right way, we have no context right now to know if that means simply to survive, to recover with his life, or whether that means that he's going to have anything close to the function he had before. We simply don't know enough. But from what we've seen and what we've heard about his recovery, it's clear that he's in a very, very dire situation.
Okay. It's chilling, obviously. With Christian Eriksen, for instance, that parallel I mentioned, he simply collapsed with nobody near him, and it was very much his own body, his own heart entering into a kind of a distress. With Hamlin, causation and correlation obviously are different things. He made the tackle. To what extent is that physical contact being attributed to as the reason for this cardiac arrest, or simply a coincidence? Or again, do we know, TJ?
Right. I mean, from what I recall of Eriksen, it was he went into sudden cardiac arrest because of an existing heart condition.
Yes.
I think it was hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And in that's the case, it's something that could be detected, but not always. And yeah, it's a sudden misfiring of the heart that causes someone to drop, and they can be immediately revived with absolutely no greater consequences. With this, it's different. If it is what the doctors I spoke to think, something known as commotio cordis, it's incredibly rare. There's no pre-existing condition. That's a requirement of commotio cordis. And what happens is the heart is struck directly with a forceful, concentrated blow at exactly the right time during the heartbeat. I mean, the National Institutes of Health in the United States report that there are fewer than 30 cases of it a year in a country of 350 million people. It typically is from something hard like a thrown baseball, softball, a hockey puck, or a hockey stick. You've seen cases in martial arts where somebody is punched directly in the heart. But it's not just that. It's where the heart is in the beat. There's a 30 millisecond window when, if you strike it during that time, what they call the ascent of the T curve in an EKG, then the heart can go into what's known as ventricular fibrillation. And it's more often than not fatal. I mean, it was a good thing that there was immediate medical attention there. But it's the only similarity is that the heart stops. But otherwise, it's a very different condition than what Erickson and many other athletes have had.
Okay. This happened on Monday Night Football as well, so it's very much a national audience watching on in horror. And we're still in the holiday season, so I suspect the audience was quite big. I've noted, just reading various dispatches in advance of talking to you, TJ, this has prompted many think pieces about the nature of the NFL, about the churn in the NFL. For instance, New York Times, Kurt Streeter had a piece, and the byline was, "The appetite for football has never been higher. Viewers look past the toll the sport takes on players' lives. This moment should force a reconsideration." And then on Yahoo Sports, Shalise Manza-Young, she was noting that some of the players, as the treatment on the pitch was coming to an end, some of the players began almost routinely or unthinkingly almost going through their warm-up routines to resume, and the game ultimately was postponed. But she was almost holding this up as an example of the callousness of the NFL. She said this should not be normal, not in the NFL, not anywhere. There's so much that needs fixing with the league that has needed to be fixed for years, but the prevailing callousness is one place to start. So between that New York Times piece I mentioned and that piece on Yahoo and others, what happened on Monday night seems to have prompted almost a conversation about the nature of the NFL. Has that been pretty widespread?
It has. I mean, I think it's been muted somewhat by a sense that people want to see what's going on with Hamlin first. There's a respect for the family and for what he's going for that, you haven't seen quite the larger conversations that I think you might once there's a greater resolution of his case. I mean, we don't know anything about what his recovery is going to be. So I think the conversation's been a little muted because of that. But this comes up with football. And, full disclosure, about 40 years ago, my father was the benefits director for the National Football League Players Association, the union. And so part of his job was helping them collect disability benefits. And when I was a young man, I got a pretty close-up look at how significant those injuries could be, how disabling they could be, even things that are just a routine part of the game. There has been a long sense among people who've played the game, as much as those who cover it or watch it, that they are treated as disposable heroes. It's known as a gladiator sport, and they're out there, beating each other into oblivion and risking their lives, quite literally, for our entertainment. And we have periods in this country where it comes up. It's just not like other sports. I mean, rugby, Gaelic football, whatever, hurling, sports that, are, contact sports with, contact and aggression and some level of violence that's part of it. Nothing really matches the physical violence of football. And I played the sport when I was young. I loved it a great deal. But we've learned in the last 10, 15 years about the damage that it causes to the brain, about the other disabilities that players can leave with. We have these big conversations. Sometimes Congress gets involved and has hearings about it, and then everyone kind of forgets and goes back to watching on Sunday. I don't know that this would be any different, because we've got a great capacity globally, not just in this country, to sort of set aside the more displeasing parts of something that we love to watch. And in this country, people love to watch their football.
That does seem to be very much the case, that the NFL is the most popular sport in the States. It brings everybody together, regardless of political persuasion, sporting persuasion, you name it. It is just universally adored. And it almost seems to be like Teflon. You can have the concussion controversy and the knowledge that concussion was causing CTE withheld, and massive payouts and all of the negative publicity that might go with that. You can have, I mean, even it's continuing this season on the concussion front with Tua Tagovailoa of Miami, who was exhibiting signs of concussion, not taken out of a game, played in a game a couple of days later, gets another bang to the head, and he's going through further concussion protocols now, and all the other extracurricular issues with the behaviours of different players being forgiven because they are commodities, and so all is forgiven and they are welcome back onto rosters. So you name it, bad publicity at every turn and issues at every turn and that gladiatorial nature at every turn. And ultimately, I would think the NFL has realised we are just unstoppable. We are the biggest show in town. It doesn't matter what they say about us. It doesn't matter how we are seen to treat the players. The deal is they get paid lots of money, and they put their bodies on the line, and it's informed consent. And I was reading these think pieces and thinking, like, they're well written and they're of the moment, but this is not going to impact on the NFL's behaviour one bit.
I don't see how it would. I mean, what you're more likely to see is certain steps taken. I mean, first of all, we need to find out what exactly happened to Damar Hamlin in that moment. Yeah. If it was in fact commotio cordis, I think what you're going to be hearing from in the NFL is, well, it was a 1 in 10 and 1 in a 100 million shot that he happened to get that injury at that moment.
And TJ, I think that
right back up.
Yeah, and I sorry to interrupt. I think that'd be a perfectly fair rationale. I mean, it's a physical game, and to be fair to the NFL, there's only so much they can do about instances like that.
No, it's completely true, and in some ways that people talk about it as another reminder of the violence of the sport. Absolutely true. It was just as violent before Damar Hamlin collapsed on the field as it will be when play resumes. If that is his injury, and again, I don't know for sure that it is. I just know what cardiologists are saying it probably is. If that is his injury, yeah, it is a statistical fluke. You don't see that injury in football that often because of the padding that they wear. Just, even at the speeds they're going, shoulder pads that will cover your chest, will disperse the force of the blow for the most part. So it is rare. And if that is what happened to him, it's still incredibly unlikely we will see it again. But it is another chance to look at just how much is at stake. I mean, you can forget pretty easily the amount of force that happened in that tackle. What looked like a routine tackle is the equivalent of a car accident for most people. And I think afterward, just like you would see if it was something political, people are going to retreat to their previous thoughts about it. If you want evidence to say football is safe enough to play, you've got it. If you want evidence to say it's far too dangerous a sport, it needs to change, well, you're going to have the same amount of evidence.
Yes. And ultimately, the force that you talk about is one of the primary attractions to
You can't take that out of it.
No,
it's just what the game is.
Intrinsic. I wonder as well, I saw the point made that in basketball, the rosters are so small and the players are so visible that maybe it humanizes them a touch, whereas NFL, the rosters are so big, they're padded up, they've got helmets on, it dehumanizes them. It plays into that gladiatorial aspect you talk about.
Oh, completely. But then again, who's more identifiable than a fighter? A boxer or UFC fighter, and people have a pretty gladiatorial attitude about that as well. You can connect with somebody deeply, but still, I think, rationalize the risk that they're taking and the damage that they're taking for your benefit. Look, there's a libertarian argument to be made that these are adults. They're, if they're old enough to vote and drink and drive a car, why shouldn't they be able to decide how they want to make a living? And okay, fair point. The fact is, informed consent doesn't, tend to change people's behavior all that much. And I think Kurt, you mentioned his piece, and he's a former colleague of mine at ESPN, terrific writer. He brings up a great point is, you can rationalize it any way you want, but the risks and the danger are what they are. Yeah. And when you do watch, you are complicit. And maybe you're fine with that, but you can't disconnect the audience's relationship to what happens.
Well, when he says viewers look past the toll that the sport takes on players' lives and this moment should force a reconsideration, I think the point not made there is viewers look past the toll the sport takes on players' lives given the money that they're paid. And that almost is the accommodation that everyone makes. Players, fans, owners alike. Well, they're being paid lots of money, therefore, ... we're okay here.
Absolutely. The money and the fame are what I think, make fans and sometimes, people in the media feel some sense of license that they can, say, hey, for that amount of money, they should have that kind of risk. Or, if they're getting paid that much, I should be able to boo or say whatever I want about them. And, if this has any impact, you hope it's just a reminder that these are human beings. They always are. We've got this habit in journalism, as well, of creating heroes when they're not heroes, they're people. And then we tear them down when they show that they're human. This was a human being with a family. This is, excuse me for saying that, this is a human being with a family. And, I think the reaction of other players, wanting to make that point, that has really dominated the conversation. That's been somewhat heartening.
Okay. Well, hopefully there's good news on Damar Hamlin's health in due course. TJ Quinn from ESPN. Pleasure, TJ. Thank you.
Pleasure's mine. Thanks so much.
Off the ball on News Talk.